Hello my model building friends, Boyd here with you, and welcome to another edition of TrekWorks. We're always trying to stay on top of what's new and hot in the modeling world, and what you see on your screen today is the Revell Star Trek 1/500 scale U.S.S. Enterprise NCC 1701 as seen in the movie Star Trek Into Darkness, otherwise referred to in modeling circles as the JJ Prise. Now this kit is about 22 inches long when it's fully assembled. You can see the box that it comes in here is quite large. Revell of Germany makes this kit, and it's unfortunately not available in the States, but you can get one by having it shipped from overseas or find a reputable supplier, and you'll probably be able to get yourself one without much problem. Be aware that right now this kit is very hot, and they're going for a fairly substantial amount of money for a model kit this size, but you may decide to wait a little while and wait till the heat cools down and maybe get one at a more affordable price, but right now they're fairly on the expensive side. But what we're going to do today is we're going to take a look at this model kit, and we're going to also go over and show you some progress that we're making on our Polar Lights 350 scale Classic Enterprise build-up. But right now what we're going to do is set up and get some parts laid out on the modeling mat here for you so you can get an up-close personal view of the parts and get an idea of the quality and the size and the construction of the kit. It'll give you a better idea of what you could look forward to if you decide to purchase one of these. So let me get that set up, guys. I'll be right back, and we'll take an up-close view of the new Revell 1/500 U.S.S. Enterprise. Stay tuned. Alright everybody, so here we are, and let's go ahead and start with our parts review here of the 1/500 Revell kit. You can see first off we have the saucer here. The saucer measures out to about 12 inches in diameter, and so it's a fairly nice size, and that goes along well with the 22-inch overall length of the model. And you can see that this is made out of some fairly robust plastic. It's fairly thick. And the nice touch that I saw that was done with this model kit was that this is actually included in a completely separate bag. It has no sprues attached or anything to it. There's no nubs or any flash sticking off of this that need to be cleaned up. Basically, this is a really clean mold, and it's pretty much the way it is, ready to be sanded and prepped and primed and ready for assembly. So that's really nice. Now this is a two-piece unit. There are some mounting pegs there in the center, and you can see just holding it up to the camera here that the usual bad seam that we deal with on a lot of Star Trek kits, especially Enterprise kits, the seam on the edge of this model fits really nice and clean. It's got a really nice fit to it. There's no warping going on. Once you get all the glue and everything down on there, that's going to lay nice and tight, and there'll be very minimal, if any, putty work to be done on that when it's all completed. On the bottom side of the saucer here, you see we don't have the usual window groupings that we have on a lot of our earlier versions of the Trek ships. In fact, overall, this kit doesn't have very many windows to deal with at all, so that's kind of interesting. But we have some nice detail here on the bottom. We've got the nice recessed panel lines, which are not very deep, so they should be easily worked with, and a light sanding on this should clean it up nicely, and again, be ready for primer and then eventually for paint. So it's a nicely designed and nicely done piece. We'll move on to the second sprue here, which are, I'm going to bring two sprues out here, which are the secondary hull pieces. And one of the things that I'm going to point out right away is that unlike the saucer, these parts are molded in incredibly thin plastic. Now, you can see just a little bit of movement here, how easily these pylons and everything are flexing. And if I were to hold this up to the light, you could almost see through this plastic, especially where some of the reliefs are on the back side of the mold. It's very thin, so you're going to have to do some pretty extensive light blocking on this one if you want to light this model internally. And it may require some reinforcement on these pylons or something to prevent the engines from sagging over time. But I'm sure people that build these will start working that out, and we'll just kind of have to see how that goes. But just a heads up that the plastic on these particular parts is really thin. And we have some details here. We have the rear shuttle bay, and you can see that the way they have this set up is it's designed to have the shuttle bay doors closed. You could maybe modify that and make them appear open, and there are no internal shuttle bay parts, so you'd have to do a little bit of scratch building if you wanted to have a little bit of a view of inside of the shuttle, or perhaps there'll be some aftermarket resin kit parts or something like that will become available for detailing the inside of the shuttle bay. But the detail on the hull is fairly nice. There's some scribed in panel lines here. There's some hatches. There's some different markings here and there and shapes. You can see we've got the vents cast in here on the sides of the pylons. So it's a fairly nicely detailed secondary hull. And the actually the studio model, or the CGI model, doesn't have a whole lot of detail on it anyway, so it's fairly smooth on the side, so it's fairly accurate representation of it. Here we're going to show you the two remaining large sprues, and what we have here is we have the base, which is nicely sized. It should be nice and stable if you choose to use that to mount the model on it. We have some bridge parts here which are nicely detailed. We see on the lower sensor array here that we do have a few more window groupings to give you some windows on the bottom of the primary saucer. The bridge itself, the BC deck, and we have the mounting pylon for the display base. Here we see that we have the impulse engine deck, which strangely is molded in opaque and not clear. It would have been nice if that part would have been molded in clear. It would have been easier for lighting, but it won't take a lot of modification to make that work. As you know, on the movie edition, you had sort of a honeycomb design here going on with the lighting, so you could take a small pin vise or Dremel tool and drill those out and get that. Since the detail is on there, you'll have a guide for doing some drilling to get that effect, and running some light through the back side of this with some bright LEDs and some careful masking will get you pretty close to having that looking nice. Now, curiously, they were calling this ship the Into Darkness Enterprise, and at the end of the movie we saw that there was a refit version of the ship with a slightly redesigned, much wider impulse engine deck, and I think they did some changes on the top of the saucer, on the spine on the top. But it would have been nice with this kit to have a few optional parts to build it either as the standard ship or the refit, since it would have been pretty easy to just include the extra parts and not do a lot of modification. The parts probably would have blended together well and allowed you to build both versions of the ship, but it is what it is. So, and I'm sure some scratch building people out there will probably do a refit version of the ship. Up next here are two more final sprues in opaque, and these are the engines, the warp nacelles, and you can see the nice detail has been included here that we actually had light coming out of these during the movie. And there's quite a few parts to building up these nacelles. If you look at the instructions, which I'll show here in just a second, the nacelles are probably the most intricate build part of the model as far as how many pieces overall are required to complete each assembly. There are some clear parts for the Bussard collectors, and the exhausts at the rear actually molded in clear, so that's a nice touch. And these are nicely done again, and these are actually made out of quite a bit thicker plastic again than the secondary hull is made out of. So that's a little bit strange why the secondary hull has to hold all that weight. Why it would be the thinnest piece of plastic is sort of odd, but again, we can probably all work around that. Let's show you next the clear parts, which I'm not going to remove from the bags because there are a few loose parts floating around there that I don't want to lose right now. But you can see basically what we have here is we have the Bussard collectors here at the front. We have some bridge clear pieces here. We have some window sections. We have the rear engine exhaust here. We have the deflector dish, which looks to be about 1.5 inches in diameter or so. Some clear inserts for windows, and some clear inserts that go in for lighting of the sides and the vents of the warp engine nacelles. So you do get a fairly ample supply of clear parts, and it was definitely nice of them to do that and keep the people that like to light their models in mind. Here we'll take a look at the instructions and the decal sheet. First up, the decal sheet. You can see that it's quite a large sheet. Unfortunately, it does not include Aztec decals, as this ship actually did have Aztec panels on it. It would have been nice to see that, but perhaps there'll be an aftermarket set out there available soon for people who would like to do that. There is already an aftermarket Aztec masking set available from Brett over at Orbital Dry Dock. I'll put his username on eBay up on the screen here. You can do a search for him on eBay and order a set. I plan on ordering a set myself for this that I'll be doing the when I do my build on this model. I'm going to be spraying it on with all the nice pearlescent colors. And Brett's produced a beautiful masking set for this, very similar to the one that I showed you guys a while back for the refit that I built up, where you have the really nice tape transfer method. And so that'll be really nice if you decide to paint your model and do that extra detail. But there are some nice decals included with this that give you all the different markings and colors. You have your sensor band rings here. You have Bussard inserts if you choose to do the decals. You've got detail around the bridge, all the registration numbers, different markings, vent cover details, hatch cover details. So it's definitely a nice, nicely sized decal set, and you've even got the option here for a nice little Enterprise plaque if you decided to make one there at the end and display it with your model. And we'll take a look finally here at the instruction sheet. Actually, this is the painting guide. Let me grab the instruction sheet as well. It's basically laid out in booklet form. So you go from page to page. As typical Revell model kits, you've got a complete list of parts with up-close pictures of the trees and the parts removed from the trees. You've got some interesting work going on here where you can actually see the Aztec pattern that's intended to go on this model. And you start off with a basic construction assembly guide here, starting off with the assembly of the bridge and the window inserts, and then the BC deck assembly completed and going on to the upper saucer. Fairly straightforward. If you built any Enterprise model kits before, it's fairly straightforward on each one. And you can see that we get into the secondary hull here next. Just giving you guys a second to have a look at this page. You've got some inner bulkhead assemblies here that I can see are going to be nice because that's going to add some strength to the inside of the model here and for making a stronger mounting point on it, so that's a good touch. And that'll make up the difference a little bit for those thin molded secondary hull parts. Here we get into some more detail with the forward deflector dish assembly, the saucer being installed onto the secondary hull, and so on. Here you get information about installing the decal on the Bussard collector. And finally, assembly of the warp engines at the end. And on to mounting it on the display base. Here we have some decal placement suggestions. Very detailed and very precise, giving you all angles of the ship, and they're nice and big so you can see everything very clearly, so that's nice. And then finally here we have a paint suggestion guide, which gives you information about the different colors and things on the ship. So that's a good look at our 2013 Enterprise Into Darkness Revell 1500 kit. It's a really hot kit right now, guys, so if you're looking for one, you might have a little trouble finding one. They're going very quickly. I know Cult TV Man had a few of those in, 2 different shipments, and they sold out within hours of acquiring them. So if you want one, you're just going to have to kind of ride it out. But I got this one off of eBay for a fairly reasonable price, and it didn't take too long for it to get here, so you might go that route as well. Okay, guys, well, I hope you enjoyed that. I'm going to come back in a second here. We're going to set up and show you some progress on our 350 TOS Polar Lights Classic Enterprise kit. So hang tight, and we'll be right back with that in a second. Alright everybody, so what we have here in front of you now is this is the lower half of the saucer, saucer from the TOS Enterprise, and you can see what I've been doing is I've been I've initially primed, sanded and wet sanded and primed my outside of the saucer here with my first coat of primer. I started off with my adhesion promoter on that first, of course, and laid down a nice couple coats of primer on that. I'm sanding in between coats to get rid of that little texture that goes on the top of this and the top and the bottom of the saucer on this model kit. And then after that I started working on installing some of the basic lighting here, and what I've done is installed all the window lighting using the included light strip tape that comes with this kit from the Round 2 lighting kit. I've installed the center planetary sensing LED, and I'm running this at 12 volts, so I'll go ahead and turn this on for you, and you can see that we're getting, I place these light strips on each little post that's indicated to get those fairly close to the windows, and I've got one here in this area here on each side that will face up, that will actually bounce off the top side of the saucer and light these 3 little window groupings here on the bottom. And then we're going to be putting in some more window groupings here in the center, and we're going to have light LED that flashes back and forth from the top to the bottom, reflecting to light both the top and the bottom group of windows in the bridge when we eventually glue these 2 halves together. I'm going to turn the lights back off here for a second for you so I can talk about this a little bit. I get a lot of questions on the channel about the wiring of these, and while this is all in this state, it'd be a good opportunity to show you what I'm talking about here, guys. There are 2 basic circuits that a lot of people use for wiring these models, and they're a type called a series and a parallel. Basically, a series circuit is where you run a chain of, let's say if I was wiring these up, I'd have a wire connecting from the plus to the minus to the plus to the minus, and so on and so forth all the way through, so that we basically had a chain of power going through each one of these LEDs, starting off with the power that comes in. Well, I tend not to like to use that type of a circuit for a really important reason, that if you have a failure anywhere on your circuit, whether one of these LED strip assemblies goes out or you lose a connection, say for some reason the wire were to come apart over time or something, anything that's beyond that point will no longer be able to receive power, since it will no longer be a complete circuit. So what I choose to do on my builds is I use a parallel circuit, and what we mean by that is that we've got power coming in, which you can see these two wires right here, which will eventually feed down through the neck and all the way through the model and go to the power source that it'll be hooked up to, which in this case is a 12-volt DC power source. The power will come in here, and you can see that what I've done is I've got a wire running off of that, a ground and a hot, which I use the green wire to represent the ground and the red for the hot. And you can see that as I pass by each one of these LED strips, I branch off with a wire that provides power to each individual component. Okay, so that what that means is that if one of these was to fail, I'm still going to have a continuous flow of power all the way through this entire circuit, and all the other components are going to remain operational. So there's a big difference, and it's just something that I've chosen to do with my builds to give a little bit of extra safety precaution to that, as far as avoiding failures. And it just makes more sense that, you know, you don't want to have LEDs burning out and things like that, where you have to tear the model back apart and try to go back and repair something over time. So it's a little extra work, and it's a little extra material because it takes more time to wire this up this way. And obviously you're going to use a little bit extra wire to connect to each one. But it's really not that bad at all, and you can see that it works out to be a nice clean installation, and it'll last for a long time. Now you can see what I've done here is I've installed these LED strips. Have an adhesive backing on each one, but I don't trust that either. Over time that can let go. So basically I use a little bit of CA glue and just touch a couple drops on the front and the rear part of these, and then a little bit in the center, just to give it some added strength. And you want to make sure you do that though when your paint is good and dry on this, so that you don't lift any paint and lose your adhesion that way. But if the paint's dry and you put those down correctly, trust me, they are not going to come off. They are on there permanently. You could get them off if you want, if you had to, but as far as just overall life of the model and normal handling of the model, they're never going to fail or never going to move on you. So that's something that you might want to think about. We're going to be doing the same procedure, and I'll show you a little bit more later on in this build when I get to the top half of the saucer and we do the bridge assembly and the lighting, and we're going to be adding navigation lights and another circuit in here for our flashing navigations and strobe lights. Now over here what I've been working on is I've got the the shuttle bay. And you can see that I've built this one very similar to the way I did John's, the last commission build that I did a while back. And what I've done is I've set the shuttle in there. I've added a couple of 350 scale crewmen in here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hook it up to power here for you and show you that what I've done to this one as well is I've opened up the shuttle itself and added a little hatch cover, open hatch cover there. And we're actually using a small SMD in that to give some interior lighting on the shuttle, such as it's sort of represent that it's, you know, it's powered up, and that they're getting ready to load it and take off or whatever they're doing, but they're up to something in there. And you can see that I've got some crewmen there, and unfortunately you can't see the entire shuttle bay here because I lost my power there. Just using these alligator clips. Let me get this going for you again. Okay, you can see that we've got the light coming from the shuttle there, and I've got a crew member mounted there farther in the back towards the wall by the door. You can't see him without the light, but I think you can probably see we've got a science officer there, or a sciences person from with their typical blue and black uniform, and then I've got the technician type guy here in the red jumpsuit carrying some type of an object about ready to load it into the shuttle bay, or into the shuttle. So that's kind of cool. And even though, you know, you'd never see this scene if the door was open, obviously, they'd be blown out into space. We're using our imagination here a little bit and imagining what the scene would be like if the door were closed. And obviously, if the door was closed, we wouldn't be able to see it at all. So that's kind of the reasoning behind that. And here we've got the bridge. And I've done all the preliminary painting on this. You can see we've got some nice detail on the chair and the helm. We've got all the correct colors. We've got the handrails done and the steps, the primary floor color, the turbo lift doors. So what I'll be doing to this next is adding in the photo etch panels that go down, the photo etch decals and panels that go down on the top of the control panels here, and then the various screen displays around the upper perimeter of the bridge walls on both sides, and then obviously the view screen at the very end. So this is coming along very well, and we're also going to be adding some more 350 scale crew figures to that as well. So things are coming along really well in this build, and in the next few days, over the weekend, I'll be moving along to the secondary hull. I've already started primering and sanding that as well, and doing the modification on the rear where we have to move a little bit of material in that to make sure that the shuttle bay will fit in there correctly. And I'll take you through that when we get to that. So that's going to be a wrap for this episode, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. We're going to be back here in the next few days with some more work on the TOS and talk about some other things. I'm also starting on the work on the Doomsday Machine diorama that I talked about. I've started to do the assembly on the TOS Constellation in 1/1000 scale and adding in some battle damage and working in my initial lighting on that. So we'll be back with an update on that as well. So take care out there, everybody. Again, thanks for the subscriptions, thanks for the views, and as always, thanks for the wonderful comments on the channel. I appreciate them from each and every one of you. We'll catch up with you soon. So take care. Until then, happy modeling, everyone.